Hello, my name is James Gallagher. I'm 62 years old and I live in the northeast corner of New York State. But I grew up in the deep south, in the hills of East Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, and Statesboro, Georgia. And I grew to love my roots in the South and being a Southerner. And so I graduated high school in Atlanta, went to college at Georgia Southern College, but you have to go to class in order to be successful, and that didn't work out too well for me. So I did what a lot of young men did. I joined the Air Force. I joined the military, and I always considered myself a Southerner until I joined the Air Force. And when I joined the Air Force, I met people from all over the United States and so many different kinds of people. And I wound up getting stationed in West Germany for 4 years, and just was a great experience for me. And so I had this shift of my identity from being a Southerner. I changed that to I'm an American first and a Southerner always. And then I got transferred to New York State, to this Northeast cold climate. And I met a woman and I got married, and we wound up having kids and adopting 5 kids. And I just wound up staying in New York. This Southern boy wound up staying in upstate New York. And, but we were going to go visit down south. And we had a visit all planned. And the day before we were to leave New York to go see my mom down in Florida, these planes flew into the Twin Towers in the Pentagon. And that was a tough day for all of us. But we were on the road after that. And as I traveled out of New York through all of these states, and we would stop for gas, people would see our license plates and go, "Hey, did you know somebody? What's going on?" And on the way down, all through New York State, were these signs at all of the exits to connecting roads: all roads to NYC closed. All roads to NYC closed. There's everywhere you go, all roads to NYC closed. And I realized, and for some of my friends, pardon my language, the phrase came to my mind: those son of a bitches did that to my state. And I realized, I said, oh my goodness, I just called New York my state. And so I was actually born in New York City, and we had moved to the South early. And I realized I was an American first, a Southerner always, and a New Yorker by both birth and by choice. And so that's who I am. That's why I'm down here. That's why I'm up here, living in a just absolutely gorgeous area of remarkable people, and living every day.
Okay, so looking back at your life, your whole life experience, what is, if you can single out one experience that impacted you positively, negatively, what was the most impactful experience? How did that affect you? How did it sort of, change you for the better, or whatever? How did that go?
There was a pivotal point in my life. I had, because of some rough family situations, had grown up very fearful, very depressed, did not have a high value of myself and who I was, and struggled immensely as a young man, and suffered depression as a result of that. Had overdosed on some drugs when I was in college, Not really intending necessarily to kill myself, but if that happened, I was fine with that. It just was in a really bad place. And when I was stationed in West Germany, I was going through another really, really rough time, and I was a long way from home, and I was very lonely. And this guy said at work that Jesus Christ could forgive anybody. I was in the South, man. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a church somewhere. So I knew the gospel story. I knew Christianity. I could pass the test, but it wasn't real to me until all of a sudden when Sam said, Jesus can forgive anybody. And immediately in my head, it was like, does that include me? Because I'm messed up. I am messed up. And so I let that kind of brew in my mind for about 3 days. And finally I woke up one morning in the dorm, and I was back at, just like I was in college. I was in a bad place, and I did not like what I was facing. It scared me as to what I might do that day. And so I just, I used a cliche. I said, I imagined my life being a football, and I just handed it off to Jesus Christ. I said, you have my life. I can't do this anymore. I've screwed it up. I have tried to be good. Now, that guy Sam was a devout Christian, drove everybody crazy at work. You know the guy, right? Always talking about Jesus and everything like that. And, but man, I was listening. And he was my trainer, and I had gotten a pretty foul mouth to include saying the Lord's name in vain. So I had been trying around Sam to not say the Lord's name in vain, because I liked Sam, and he was the one good thing that was happening for me there. And I couldn't stop. Man, GD this, GD that, you know. And one day I said, Sam, man, I'm sorry. I'm trying to clean up my language for you. You know, I know it's not something you approve of. And, you know, he just laid it back on me. He says, I'm not the one you're offending. And so I just like, it's okay. All right. You know, we'll just do the best we can. So I had that moment in the dorm where I just said, Jesus, you've got the ball. And so then I'm like wondering, there was no fireworks. There was no immediate peace. There was nothing anybody that would want to say that something really happened. No idea. Get up, go get chow. I go 3 days. Got 3 days off. I get 3 days. It's time to go back to work. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Sam and I are waiting for transportation out to the radar site. And I'm wondering, what did I do? Did I do anything? Is it real? And so I look at Sam. I said, Sam, have you noticed a difference in me in the last 3 days? And it was like he was waiting for the question, but he had no idea. He said, yeah, you haven't used the Lord's name in vain in 3 days. And I stopped, and I thought, I tried to quit, and it's like, wow. Well, I think I did that born again thing, and he just blew up like a firecracker and went crazy and thoroughly embarrassed me for the rest of the day and all this other stuff or whatever. Sam was a pistol. And I realized, you know, that may not seem like a big deal. Some people want to have the big story that Jesus cured me from crack or whatever it was. So for me, it was just swearing. But what it did is it said, I heard God say, I'm real, I heard you, and you're mine. And so now I messed up a lot since then. I'll probably mess up again. But that started a journey, and that changed everything for me, because now I am viewing life through what Christ said are the most important things. He said there's two most important things: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. I needed to know myself to love somebody else. That includes the bad parts of me. That includes the good parts of me and everything in between. And it also means that I have a heart. I have emotions, they're real. I have a mind, and I have a soul. And I have strength. Life is about doing something. Just having an imagination is not enough. You have to do something with it. And I realized those are the parts of my life, is my heart, my mind, and my soul. And my soul was shallow and sick and hurting, and it still is from time to time. And I've had some depression since then. As a Christian, I got no apologies for that. Life is hard, but I've never been alone. And I am a child of God at 62 years old.
So, you mentioned something about having to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So, how does one, because I'm sure a lot of people on this journey and want to sincerely be better people, but sometimes it's tough. It's a hard process to look in the mirror and just be honest about some of the things we've done or said to people. So how does one go about that journey of being honest with yourself in a loving manner, in a healthy manner? How does one hold themselves accountable and so on?
In a loving and healthy manner towards themselves is important, but you do not need to underestimate the danger of that pursuit. If you're going to pursue being honest with yourself and really seeing who you are in your entirety, you need to be prepared to be frightened. You need to be prepared to understand you don't have a clue as to how bad you are. The prophet Jeremiah said, the heart is deceitfully wicked, who can know it? He didn't say the enemies of this nation, their hearts are deceitfully wicked. He didn't say the other political party. He didn't divide any other group. This is a guy who was known as a prophet of God. He spoke for God, and he included himself, that the heart is deceptively evil. It's deceptively evil. Now imagine you're walking down the street. All of us are walking down the street, and you want honesty. So let's say over your head is a floating TV screen, and everything you think is projected to the rest of the world. How you feeling right now about that honesty thing, right? Where are you looking? What are you thinking? That's part of who you are. There are stories, probably throughout humanity, but the one that comes to mind was there was a unit in Germany early in World War II where they needed guards for a prison camp. And they went to this town and they recruited ordinary people, barbers, pharmacy people, all bakers, all kinds of people, just ordinary German people that would be ordinary in any community and anywhere in the world. And they took them and they said, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do. It's going to be really hard. Anybody that doesn't want to come doesn't have to come. And a few left. And most stayed. And these men who loved their wives, who loved their children, who did good things for all kinds of people, slowly but surely became part of history's most evil actions. The take home from that is we tend to be very judgmental of people throughout history. And I recently heard somebody say that um, something to the effect that it's not the people that are the problem. It's the evil that's throwing the stones. I was hurting as an individual, and God said, you just need to come crawl in my lap and let me hold you. Now, my dad, I never really had a dad, and for the first 4 years of my life, he brought hell on our family. So I don't know what a father's like, and I did this Heavenly Father thing was weird to me because I didn't have a father. And this was the first time I felt like, holy cow, I got a father. And I, as an adult, as a grown man, spiritually, I'm kneeling at this altar, but spiritually, I crawl into the arms of God and I start crying like a baby. And I'm not ashamed of it. I, for the first time, really understood that a dad was supposed to just be there and just be able to hold his child and be there for him. And that was a spiritual experience. God, I never saw God. I never really heard God, not in an audible voice or anything. But that was, I'm telling you, that was real. Now, I don't have a lot of these stories. I'm not that kind of guy per se. I like to think about my faith as much as I have these kind of ethereal experiences. But there was a time I was working at a hardware store, and I lost my hat and my sunglasses, and I worked outside, and I had skin cancer, so wearing my hat was important to me, and I lost them, and I just said, well, okay, that happens. Another worker came up to me and said, hey, are you missing your hat and your sunglasses? I said, yeah. Well, they're at the customer service booth. You must have left them there last night. I said, of course that's where I left them. Thank you. Yeah, somebody in another department took them and threw them in the trash. And I was like, are you, in my righteous indignation, are you kidding me? What's wrong with that person? And I went up and I found them, and they were in the trash can, and I pulled them out of the trash can, and I went looking for the first person I could complain to, and there was Sally, and I went right over, and I knew Sally didn't like that person, and here I went over to start and tell Sally about, oh, can you believe this other person took and threw it in the trash? And I feel somebody poking me in the side. And there's nobody standing beside me. So I know exactly who's poking me in the side. So in case you haven't figured it out, I tend to be long-winded. I buttoned that story up really short, which in itself is a minor miracle. And I leave Sally and I go out into the vestibule in the open area, and I look out to the sky, and I just go, all right, Lord, what's going on? And I didn't audibly hear it, but I just could tell, and I could hear him say, James, one day you are going to be with me, and I am going to show you the universe, and I'm going to show you planets and comets and black holes and quasars, and you are going to travel the expanse of the universe, and it is going to be awesome. And I'm telling you, I got caught up in that, and I was just like, wow. Yes, one day I will not be on this earth, and this will be. And he said, I am going to take you to the very edge of the universe, and I am going to let you see what is beyond the universe. And I went, wow. I just couldn't believe, why am I having this experience in a hardware store? I just was like, and then God said, at that point, how important is a hat and a pair of sunglasses going to be? And it was like, oh, you did not go there, Lord. And you know, he did. And I learned, yeah, that was not nice. That person was not a nice person, but that didn't matter. Why am I complaining about a hat and sunglasses when that person might really be hurting worse than I have ever hurt before? That is the spiritual realm, that when you walk with Jesus, he will take you into that, and he will teach you how to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. And when that person who you just absolutely can't stand, they are the worst person in the world. He will teach you to love them like yourself. I was just watching a video of a guy, and I don't know who this guy is. He seems to make some sense, but I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's bad, but he served some really hard time in prison, and he got his act straight, and he's trying to help this school that's in the toughest neighborhood of St. Louis, and these kids. It's a really tough school, and they're trying to reach out to these really tough kids. It's super poor, but even if they can help them, these kids have to walk through these gang-controlled areas to get home, and they're getting beaten up and things stolen from them. So you know what he did? Now this is a guy that mean, tough, brutal, ruthless, was in prison. And he went to the gang areas, and he sought out the gang leaders. And the first one, he said, "Hey, this is who I am. I'm working with this school. My life has changed. I'm trying to help these kids. I want 2 hours. From 4 to 6 o'clock, you leave these kids alone and let them get home. After 6, it's yours. If they're dilly-dally, that's on them." And the gang leader said something really interesting. He said, cops have come, they'll come for 3 days and guard these kids, and then they're gone, and all kinds of people scream and holler at us. And they call us things. He says, nobody ever came to talk to us. Nobody ever asked us to change for something better. And it was like, yeah. What we're asking people to change before we give them the power to change. We as Christians somebody once said, the greatest testimony about God is Christians, and the worst testimony about God is Christians, right? And it's like, why do we expect people who don't have that spiritual realm and world available to them, that love from a heavenly Father, to act the way we want them to act? Of course they're not going to act that way. It's not about getting them to change their behavior. It's about introducing them to the God that created them. They were woven in their mother's womb. They were created in the image of God, but we don't see them that way. When we learn to see them that way, then our hearts will be softened, and then maybe God will decide to use us. Until then, we're worthless. God created life. When did that life start? Is often a question that comes before the question that you asked. And the answer is not at conception, because the egg is living. The sperm is living. They just haven't come together yet. When did life start? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is when life started. When He breathed out animals, that's when animal life started. When He took the clay and formed it and then breathed His breath into Adam, that is when life started for Adam. And then when He created woman out of his rib, the part that protects his heart, from his side, not his foot, from his side, his partner, and then they had a child. That was life, and life has continued ever since then. When the sperm and the egg come together, there is a specific genetic dispensation that is unique. And at that point, I'm guessing that is when life starts, because we know that at the youngest part, when there's a perceivable head, perceivable arms, and perceivable legs that, not exactly, but you can see that they're there. It's pretty gruesome. I haven't seen the worst part of it, but there is film of an abortion. And as soon as the instrument comes into the womb, the mouth turns into a circle as if it is screaming. And it's referred to as the silent scream. That child, and it moves. It moves to move away from the instrument that has entered into the womb. Has that child been taught anything? Educated? Know anything about science? Nothing. When exactly does that start? As far as I'm concerned, at the very beginning. We need to respect all life, all the time, and then you're never wrong, because the consequence of being wrong, if we can kill the weakest among us, how can we love our neighbor as ourselves? This is hard, and earlier I talked about being honest and knowing the worst about yourself. And I can honestly say that in my earlier life, I was as complicit with this as anyone. So this is not being judgmental, this is being honest. This is being discerning. Okay, we can be discerned. We're not supposed to be too judgmental, but we're not supposed to throw discernment out the window. So this is a hard thing to say, because I want to love my neighbor. I want to understand a woman who's gone through this. I want to understand a doctor that's performed this. I want to understand a boyfriend or husband that's encouraged this to happen. That I stand with you and try to at least sympathize, if not empathize with you. But if we can kill children for the simple convenience of sexual orgasm without having to raise children, we're doomed. Now, that is a hard thing to say, and it is complicated by the fact that there are so many children that are not wanted. So that is part of the reason why my wife and I took in 2 little girls whose parents were in prison. And we provided a home for them for 2.5 years. And they eventually went back to live with their mom. We were able, but she got pregnant and went back into prison, and we were able to adopt that child. In the process of adopting that child, we adopted 4 more children. So that's a total of 7 kids that the world would say, throw away. And we said, no way. And we put everything aside, the futures that other people had for us, the futures we had for ourselves. We understood that if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, if we're going to believe what we believe about abortion, then we have to live. We have to live like we really believe it. And so we've done that with a lot of difficulty, but no regrets. Do we have limits, and when does God remove those limits so that we can become something greater than ourselves? Right. And I think you hit on that. And again, it starts with this brutal honesty and humility. I like to ask people a question: what's the difference between being humbled and being humiliated? Because they have humble and humility have the same root word, which means dirt, right, in the Greek. And the difference is that, and it's a negative view, like you're nothing but dirt, right? And the difference between being humbled and humiliated is that the humbled person is willing to admit their fallacies and their faults and their problems. The humiliated person was lying to themselves and therefore lying to the rest of the world until the truth got revealed. And so that wisdom that you talked about, that might be the God potential that's in our brains. Again, I'm not sure whether that's really in an unused part of our brain or not, but you're exactly right. It starts with humility. It also includes a fear of God, both a reverential fear. So, I'm old, and so I'm going to give you the, hey, back in the day when I was, right? And all you young people are laughing at that or whatever. But I'm telling you, there were some things that were different. And one of the things that was different is when you did something wrong at school, that was a reflection on your family. That wasn't just Jimmy Gallagher messed up at school and got a spanking. Yeah, we got hit hard, and it helped us. It was not a bad thing back then. But it was worse going home, because then it was like not just another punishment, but you had to look at your family. I had to look at my mom and my grandmother, right? Tell them what I did, because I knew the school was going to tell them. And it's like, that's our family. It was a reflection on the family. Well, when you do that spiritually, it's a reflection on God. Remember what I said earlier, that, the best testimony for God are Christians. The worst testimony for God are Christians. You're becoming the worst. So you need to be humble. You need to have a reverential fear of God. Like, I do not want to mess with the name of God, and that there's real consequences. A word that's really popular in our society right now is justice, right? And so we have social justice warriors. So I believe in God justice warriors. And the reason I believe in God justice warriors over social justice warriors, and it's not derogatory towards social justice warriors. They see things that are wrong, and a lot of the things are wrong, and we may have some different perceptions about that, but most of these people really want something better. So I'm with that. The problem is, it's a lot of blame, and it goes way back. And for justice to exist, there has to be mercy. And in the social justice warrior mentality, I don't see any mercy. However, you can't have mercy if you don't have justice. And most of us want justice when it's somebody else, but we don't want justice when we're the ones that are guilty, right? So we got to be willing to play both sides of that fence right there, and that's where I think a godly justice warrior humbles himself first and says, "Look, long ago, when they used to hang people, there was a big stand, and it was called the gallows. So when you went to the gallows, you were going to be hung by a rope until you were dead. That's the way they stated it. And I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but they were marching, and people would come from far and wide to watch this, which was sick. And they were marching someone up to the gallows, and there was a leader there who said, "But for the grace of God, there go I." Put himself in that guy's shoes. Said, that could have been me.